Hello everybody, welcome back to Ghostly French Toast, and today we're talking about another DLC fight, maybe probably the not peakest DLC fight in Dark Souls 3. We're talking about Halflight, and more importantly, we're talking about the Spear of the Church, or known as the Church of Filianor. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of Halflight lore near the end, but this is more focused on the Spear of the Church, and I have a couple of little theories that a lot of people haven't really talked about, which are in regards to the church itself. So the basics. Halflight is a boss from Dark Souls 3, which is kind of it's if you're offline or you can't find a connection, Halflight will be summoned in order to fulfill the fight itself. It's an NPC fight, so not like a Gale or it's just a regular character similar to you with the moveset, all that. Can summon different players. So Articator Jugo, which is technically the boss itself, can summon any enemy, whatever, any player to help protect Filianor in order to fight you, the player. And can summon, I think probably the most interesting part of this fight is summoning two Painter Guardians. And you might be wondering, Ghostly French shows, why is this interesting? Well, I have a whole slide discussing why I think this is probably a very interesting concept in like the lore. I think Half-Light, since everyone dogs on the fight itself because it's absolutely dog shit compared to every other boss fight in this DLC, I think a lot of the lore is actually kind of like overlooked when discussing it. So the Church of Filianor itself, its entire goal is protecting Filianor, and Filianor is Gwyn's youngest child. And this was kind of like a bargaining chip to the Pygmies. So the whole point of the Ring City is, yes, it has these high walls, not to keep things out, but to keep things in. You have basically everything Gwyn can use to keep those Pygmies in the Ring City. You have Midir, an ancient dragon, basically used to lock away the Pygmies as like kind of like a safeguard. Even though it got corrupted by the dark, Gwyn used his worst enemy, the dragons, in order to seal away the Pygmies. Because I think even the dragons knew how dangerous the Pygmies were in the grand scheme of things. Gwyn used Filianor as a bargaining chip in order to kind of appease the Pygmies in a way, and have her basically the head of this church that is located in the city. And one of the main reasons Gwyn and the Pygmies both sought after her was the Pygmies kind of used her as a way to hold the Dark Soul, if you will. I think the egg that Filianor has, and I want to make a video discussing just Filianor's concept, Filianor is actually holding the reality itself. So we talk about with the painter, how the painter is painting a new world. This physical object is an actual reality. And I think the egg itself is kind of like this shell. So Gwyn is kind of holding the Age of Fire, like the world itself hostage. And he's built up this kind of shell to basically mask that, and it hides the truth. And I think, as much as I want to say that there's a leap in time, like time skip, whatever, I actually think this is how the world actually is. So instead of having like moving forward in time years, even at the end of the world, the Ring City is the end of the world. I think Filianor is just kind of hanging up a curtain and I think Gwyn's doing that, one, to appease the Pygmies, and two, to keep the Age of Fire actually looking somewhat strong, even though the world's fading. And as stated earlier, Filianor kind of helps keep the Pygmies at bay for some reason. Gives them some kind of peace of mind. So we see even in the real world, if we're going off that idea, that the Pygmies were like, oh, Filianor, oh, the Red Hood has come to eat our souls. So I do think Filianor is a very interesting concept, because Filianor has some kind of power to hold reality at bay, and I think Gwyn uses it as a curtain. Because even if we look at Filianor has this very porcelain kind of design, where you have these, even looking at the cutscene, where it doesn't even look like cracks or like veins in Filianor. It's like kind of cracks or corruption, if you will, of the Dark Soul. I think with the world falling apart, with the egg shattering, and then basically everything being revealed to be sand and nothing, I think that's probably what's actually happening in the real world. Why Painting Guardians? So the first time we meet the Painting Guardians is they guard the painting of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1 in Anor Londo. And with this, with Arya, it's a different world. It's kind of this separate pocket dimension, pocket reality. So the painting guardians are very good at that's their job. They guard these different worlds, all that, and I think that's a very main thing to take note of. Where they guard the egg, and as stated earlier, I think the egg's kind of a curtain to the true reality, if you will, not this like alternate world, whatever. But I think Gwen knows that. So Gwen basically put the painting guardians there in order to enforce like the safety of that world, and I think that's their main duty. Because like as much as they can guard the paintings, we find like their gear all over the place. We find their sheaves in Dark Souls 3. We find them in Orlando. And Orlando is kind of this veiled city, even though it's fallen down. It was originally a veiled city where it was supposed to look high and mighty, but in reality, behind Gwendolyn's illusions, it's fallen apart. It's all that. But I think the entire purpose of Painting Guardians is to be able to hold up this kind of curtain for Gwen. And the Ariamis was kind of this curtain to hide basically everything that was like heretical to the Gwen's Age of Fire, where you put everything in that painting and you have this pretty painting, but you're not supposed to touch it or you're going to go in there. And I think that was the entire role, where they're supposed to guard this like kind of from like the hidden things of the world, if you will. And basically as stated earlier, it transports to this new world similar to Ariamis, but it's also unseals the veil of the end of the world, if that makes any sense. And Gwen knew that, and I think in the grand scheme of things, as we talk about like this end of the world concept for the Age of Fire and how it's actually already happening, I feel like that Gwen knew this, and Gwen knew this was going to happen. So that's why I think, as much as like the whole thing is like you have Medivh, all that to keep the pygmies in. You have Gwen giving Filianor and creating the Church of Filianor in order to make sure the egg doesn't get out. I think Gwen knew this was actually happening, and this was the end of the world. So that's why he made it where it's like, hey, we're keeping everybody in here, and we are making sure, because this is like point of no return right here. This is like most protected part. You have multiple adjudicators which stay along for a long time and summon dead enemies, so you won't have to enforce an army. So Gwen knew this was the long call. As long as he can keep the Ring City, the Age of Fire will keep on prevailing. Now talking about Halflight. From Ulasil. So in Dark Souls 1, we learned from Ulasil with the Authorities of the Abyss DLC. Uses light magic and a weapon of Medivh's scales, the Frayed Blade, which imbued with the darkness of the Abyss. So we know Medivh has already fallen to the Abyss when Halflight comes to the city and joins the Church of Filianor, which I think is a very important thing to note when discussing the DLC, because we know Medivh wasn't always corrupted by the Abyss, and we know Halflight has been at the Church for a long time, because Halflight is one of the highest ranking members of the Church itself. And he also has beef with the Pygmies. So I'm going to discuss more into my little like headcanon with why Halflight's there to begin with in a second, but we want to talk about he came from Ulasil, where Ulasil was corrupted by the Abyss, by Manus, who's also a pygmy. And we see, I think a lot of because like as much as like we have like the spears, all that, they're very light-based kind of weaponry, where with Gwen's weapons, whatever, are lightning. He uses lightning incantations. So I think with the creation of the Spear of the Church, I think Ulasil, when Halflight came there, I think that's when the Church of Filianor was actually created, and the role of the Spear of the Church was when Halflight, because a lot of the magic stemmed from a bit of electricity and light magic itself. So I think that's a very interesting thing just to take note of. Halflight's beef. Manus destroyed Ulasil, and I feel like a lot of people haven't really talked about why Halflight's even there to begin with. Yes, he was traveling, but Manus destroyed Ulasil, and must have made him pretty fucking pissed. I would be pissed too. I personally think he helped join the Church in order to seal away the Pygmies and make sure the Pygmies don't get out again, and like spread like the dark itself. And I think that's a very interesting thing to take note of, where Manus was probably the first big introduction to the Abyss in Dark Souls. Um, so I think having him seeing like there's a whole fucking city where this can break out must have made Half-Light want to go over there, and he also witnessed the destruction firsthand. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting little character. I want to talk. I have a couple ideas. I'm gonna make a poll. I either want to talk about from next week's video. I want to talk about Grave Tender and Grave Defender because there's some interesting stuff with that. Or I want to talk about Church of Filianor because I'm going on my little Dark Souls binge, but probably just gonna start some Bloodborne stuff. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on Ghostly French Toast. Bye.